My name's Owen. I'm 27, and 3 weeks ago, I watched my estranged parents stroll into my grandfather's memorial in matching black suits like they were attending the reading of their inheritance, not the funeral of the man they hadn't spoken to in years. The same man who helped raise me when they kicked me out of the house at 18, told me I was a disgrace, and then ghosted me like I never existed. Let me back up a bit. Growing up, my parents always made it clear that I was the family disappointment. I was the art kid in a household of overachievers. My dad, a strict military vet turned insurance executive, believed emotions were weaknesses. My mom, a former beauty queen who traded in her crown for wine tastings and charity luncheons, only ever cared about appearances. My younger sister Ava? She was their golden child. Picture-perfect GPA, homecoming queen, cheer captain, early admission to Stanford, the whole glossy catalog. Meanwhile, I was the weird one sketching dragons in my notebooks and skipping pep rallies to finish comic books in the library. At first, they thought my creativity was a phase. Then they thought it was rebellion. By the time I told them I wanted to go to art school and that I wasn't going to pretend to be straight just to make their friends comfortable, they made it clear I was on my own. "Don't bother coming back once you walk out that door," my dad said the night I left. His voice was ice. "We're done coddling failure." I left with a duffel bag and $300 in my bank account. I didn't even get to keep my childhood dog, Rufus. But there was one person who didn't turn his back on me, Grandpa Ray. He'd always been the quiet presence in the background. My mom's father, a retired mechanic with a crooked smile and grease-stained hands. He lived in a modest, two-story house just outside of town, the same one my mom grew up in before she started pretending she was above it. When I had nowhere else to go, Grandpa Ray cleared out his garage studio and said, "It ain't much, but it's yours if you want it." That man saved me. He let me crash at his place rent-free until I got on my feet. Fed me. Encouraged me to pursue illustration when no one else did. I got my first freelance gig while sitting on his back porch sketching portraits of Rufus from memory. He even helped me set up a tiny Etsy shop. Over the next few years, I built up a small but steady career doing comic art and character design. Nothing glamorous, but it was mine. And every step of the way, Grandpa Ray was there, with his thermos of black coffee, his gruff advice, and his endless support. We grew close, closer than I ever was with my actual parents. And slowly, he started opening up. Turns out, Grandpa Ray wasn't as modest as he let on. Behind that worn-down pickup and oil-stained overalls was a man who'd made some smart, and I mean smart, investments back in the day. Classic cars. Industrial real estate. A few stocks he forgot about in the 90s that exploded over time. He wasn't flashy about it. Kept things simple. But one evening, when we were sitting by the fire pit and he handed me a thick binder labeled estate, he just said, "I've got more than enough for a rainy day. And I want to make sure you're the one who benefits. Not your mother. Not your father. You." I laughed. Thought he was being sentimental. I mean, he was 84 and still fixing his own sink. But he looked me dead in the eyes and said, "I need you to promise me something, Owen. When the time comes, don't let them snake their way back in." I promised. Then, a few months ago, he got sick. It came fast. One week he was cracking jokes about my millennial art friends drinking mushroom coffee, and the next he was in the hospital, lungs failing, kidneys shot. I visited him every day, talked to doctors, managed the hospice care. My parents? Not a single call. Not even a sympathy card. And yet, when Grandpa Ray passed and the memorial was announced, guess who suddenly remembered he existed? Yup, Margaret and Henry, Mr. and Mrs. Disowned, your son, showed up at the church wearing designer sunglasses and smug expressions, like they were walking onto a movie set. Ava came too, but she hung back, looking unsure. I hadn't spoken to her in years either. Last I heard, she was working some high-powered finance job in New York and dating a guy named Carter who owned a boat. I didn't even approach them. I just stood near the casket and let them do their little performance, hugging people they hadn't seen in a decade, dabbing their eyes at the perfect angle for sympathy, even cornering the pastor afterward with stories about Grandpa Ray fixing up their bikes as kids. It was disgusting. But the real insult came at the post-funeral reception. There was this awkward little gathering at the community hall, catered by a local bakery Grandpa used to love. I was making rounds, thanking people for coming, when I saw my parents at a corner table, already discussing the house. As in, Grandpa Ray's home. The one he let me live in for the past 9 years. I caught just a fragment of the conversation as I walked past. We'll probably gut the kitchen first, my mom was saying, swirling her wine like she was on House Hunters. Make it more modern. That old stove's a fire hazard. My dad nodded. Shouldn't take long to get a valuation. Market's hot right now. If we offload the place before Q3, we can push it into a trust and minimize tax liability. That's when I stopped. Excuse me. They both turned. My mom offered a smile, so fake it should have come with a barcode. Owen, I was just saying how much potential the house has. Don't worry, we'll handle everything. You've done enough. I stared at her, then at my dad. I live in that house. He gave a tight, patronizing chuckle. Yes, and we appreciate you keeping it in decent shape. But it's time for the family to make real decisions now. I couldn't believe it. The audacity. These people hadn't spoken to me in almost a decade. They hadn't cared when I was couch surfing, job hunting, or caring for the man they ignored in his final months. And now, suddenly, they were entitled to everything? I didn't argue. Not yet. I just walked away. But I made one stop before leaving. To Grandpa Ray's lawyer, Mr. Hamilton, a stoic, gray-haired man who'd known Grandpa for over 40 years. He was sipping decaf and nodding along to some condolences from another guest. When he saw me, he set down his cup. Is everything all right, Owen? I leaned in, lowering my voice. They're already planning renovations. For the house. He gave me a long look. They'll be disappointed. But don't worry. Your grandfather's final instructions were very clear. The will's reading is in a few days. Just be there. And oh, I was going to be there. They were in for a surprise. They just didn't know it yet. But first came the call, and what they said on that call. That was when things really started unraveling. 3 days after the funeral, I got a call from Mr. Hamilton's office confirming the reading of the will. Thursday morning, 10 a.m. sharp. Formal attire. He said those last 2 words like they meant something. I didn't sleep much the night before. My brain kept rewinding to that reception. The way my parents had spoken about Grandpa's house like it was already theirs. The way my mom had touched my arm like we were old friends. The way my dad had looked right through me, like I was still 18 and too soft to matter. I kept wondering if I was overthinking it. If I'd misheard. Maybe it was just a misunderstanding, a tone taken the wrong way. But then, at 11:42 p.m., my phone lit up. It was Ava. Just seeing her name gave me a strange jolt. We hadn't talked properly since I left home. She sent me a couple of birthday texts over the years, vague and safe. Hope you're doing well. Thinking of you. I never responded. Not because I hated her, far from it, but because I didn't know which version of Ava I'd be getting. The sister who used to bring me orange slices after gym class, or the one who called me a drama queen the night our parents kicked me out. Still, I answered. Some part of me was curious. Hey, she said, her voice quiet. I know it's late. It is. A pause. Then, I wanted to give you a heads up. I sat up in bed. About what? They think they're getting everything, she said, barely above a whisper. Dad's been on the phone with some realtor in Scottsdale. And Mom's already going through Grandpa's furniture catalog. She keeps talking about how quaint it all is. I didn't respond. I could feel something cold settling in my chest. They think you'll hand over the keys after the will's read. Ava continued. They said you'd do the right thing. Did you tell them the right thing is letting me grieve in the house I lived in for nearly a decade? No, she said. I didn't say anything. Of course she didn't. Ava never did. Always stayed out of the line of fire. Switzerland in our family war. Why are you calling me, Ava? Another pause. Because I'm not sure if they're right or not. About the will. About you. I let out a breath, exasperated. You don't trust Grandpa? I don't know what to trust anymore. She sounded so tired, like a balloon that had been slowly leaking air for years. I remembered that look on her face when she was a teenager, back when she'd lock herself in her room after dinner and cry silently into her pillow. We'd never talked about it. But I'd heard her. Well, I said finally, you'll find out tomorrow. The line went silent. Then she hung up. I stared at the screen for a long time, feeling this weird mix of sadness and fury knotting up in my chest. That call wasn't about warning me. It was about measuring me, seeing if I'd bent. But I'd already bent once, and it nearly broke me. The office was sleek and cold. Polished wood floors, glass walls, chairs that looked expensive but felt like sitting on guilt. My parents arrived 10 minutes early, all business, holding lattes and wearing designer black like they were prepping for a photo shoot. My dad shook Mr. Hamilton's hand with the kind of confidence that made my skin crawl. My mom gave me a small nod, then sat down and pulled out her phone, already scrolling through Zillow listings. Ava walked in just before 10. She looked different than I remembered. Sharper, maybe. Her hair was shorter, cut into a blunt bob, and her heels clicked across the floor like punctuation. She didn't sit next to me. She didn't sit next to them either. She chose the empty chair across the table, like she was watching a chess match unfold. Mr. Hamilton entered last, holding a thick manila folder that looked older than half the people in the room. He sat, cleared his throat, and said, "Let's begin." What followed was surreal. He started with the formalities: Grandpa Ray's full name, date of death, legal standing, etc. Then he began reading the will. There were small bequests, a few sentimental items to old friends, a donation to his favorite animal shelter, a letter to his old mechanic buddy in Arizona. Then he paused, turned a page, and looked at me. "Owen," he said, "your grandfather left the entirety of his liquid assets, properties, and investments, totaling an estimated $10.3 million at time of evaluation, to you." Silence. Complete. Deafening. Stomach-churning silence. I didn't move. I didn't even blink. My dad scoffed. "Excuse me." My mom let out a soft, almost comical laugh. That can't be right." Mr. Hamilton didn't flinch. "It's correct, as per the revised and notarized will, updated 7 months ago." "You mean to tell me," my father said, his voice rising, "that this entire estate, everything, is going to him? The boy who walked out on this family. He was disowned," I muttered. My dad snapped toward me. "Don't play the victim, Owen. You told me to leave, Dad. You said I was dead to you. You made it pretty clear." My mom blinked like she was waking up from a dream. No. There has to be some mistake. We're his children. We're supposed to be the beneficiaries. Per Mr. Raymond Hutchins's final request, Mr. Hamilton said, flipping to the next page, he has included a statement to be read aloud. He pulled out a single sheet of paper and began reading. "To Margaret and Henry, you both stopped being my children the moment you turned your back on my grandson. Blood may be thicker than water, but love is thicker than either. I raised Owen not because I had to, but because you didn't. And I won't reward neglect with inheritance. You get nothing. And before you call it cruel, remember who made the first cut." My mom's hand shot to her mouth. My dad's jaw clenched so tight I thought his teeth might crack. Mr. Hamilton folded the letter and placed it gently on the table. "That concludes the will." They didn't speak. They didn't even look at me. Ava did, though. She didn't look angry or shocked. She just looked hollow, like someone who had seen this coming and still wasn't prepared. They stood up, slowly, stiffly. My father muttered something under his breath that I didn't catch. My mother gathered her purse like it was the last scrap of dignity she had left. And then they left. I should have felt victorious. I should have felt like I'd won. But all I felt was numb. That should have been the end of it. A clean break. A quiet line in the sand. But of course, that's not how my family works. The next day, I found my tires slashed. All 4. I was parked right outside the house. My house. The same one my parents had tried to gut for resale. I stood there, staring at the shredded rubber, and knew it wasn't random. This wasn't some drunk teenager with a grudge. This was personal. Then came the texts. Blocked numbers. No names. "Hope you enjoy your blood money." Funny how fast people change when they get a little cash. Grandpa must be rolling in his grave. I didn't respond, but it kept coming. My social media blew up with fake accounts calling me selfish. I got tagged in posts accusing me of elder manipulation. One of them even posted an old photo of me at 17, braces, oversized hoodie, holding up a drawing of a robot. The caption read, "This is who stole our family legacy." Then Ava showed up, unannounced, at my front door. She looked even more exhausted than before. Her eyes had this watery glassiness, like she hadn't slept in days. "I need to talk to you," she said. I let her in. She paced the living room for a solid minute before saying anything. Then she dropped onto the couch and exhaled. "They're spiraling," she said. "Dad thinks you somehow tricked Grandpa into changing the will. Mom's already calling lawyers. They're saying you manipulated him when he was sick." I leaned against the kitchen counter, arms folded. "So what? Now I'm the villain." "I'm not saying it's true. I'm just telling you what they're saying." "Why are you really here, Ava?" She looked up at me, and for the first time, I saw it, the guilt. Raw and heavy. "Because I think they're planning something." Something worse than slashing tires or sending threats. My stomach tightened. Like what? She hesitated. I don't know. But Dad said something last night. He said, if Owen wants to act like this is war, then fine. He'll find out how far we're willing to go. I stared at her. And you just let him say that? What was I supposed to do? I'm barely holding on as it is. They're dragging me into all of this like I had a say in any of it. You do have a say, Ava. You always did. You just never said anything. That shut her up. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Then she stood. I just wanted you to know. Be careful. She left without another word. And for the first time since the funeral, I locked every door in the house. Because something was coming. Something bigger. And I had no idea how far they'd go. For the next 2 weeks, I barely left the house. I kept the blinds half closed, the doors locked, and a crowbar by the bed. It wasn't exactly rational. My parents weren't the type to break in at 2 a.m. like cartoon villains, but that didn't matter. Rationality had gone out the window the day they sat at Grandpa's funeral and talked about renovations like I didn't exist. The neighborhood was quiet. Too quiet. Every sound, a car slowing down, a footstep on gravel, made my heart leap into my throat. And that's when I realized something awful. I wasn't just scared of them. I was scared of becoming the kid they always said I was. Fragile, directionless, soft. I hadn't drawn in days. My sketchpad sat untouched on the kitchen counter. The same sketchpad I used to carry with me everywhere. The same one Grandpa once picked up off the porch and flipped through, whistling under his breath and saying, "You know, this stuff's real talent, Owen. You keep this up, and the world's gonna notice." But now, I couldn't even pick up a pencil. Every time I tried, my hands shook. It was like they'd taken not just the money, not just my piece, but the one part of me that felt like mine. And then came the letter. It arrived in a plain white envelope, hand-delivered. No return address. No stamp. Just my name, Owen Hutchins. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Thick, formal, the kind you'd use for invitations or lawsuits. It read, Notice of Contest. Pursuant to Arizona Revised Statute Section 14 to 3701. Henry and Margaret Hutchins hereby contest the validity of the last will and testament of Raymond Hutchins, dated March 14, 20XX. Grounds for contest include undue influence, diminished capacity, and fraudulent inducement. The estate will be placed under temporary injunction pending further review. I read it 3 times. Then I sat down, placed the paper on the table, and stared at the ceiling. It felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. They were suing me, not just trying to intimidate, not just sending threats or planting rumors. They were formally, legally challenging the one thing Grandpa had left me, his final wishes. The house, the assets, everything. Frozen, just like that. The next few days were a blur of calls and consultations. Mr. Hamilton connected me with a probate attorney named Sheila Jameson. Tough, sharp, mid-50s, with silver-streaked hair and a voice that could cut glass. She didn't sugarcoat things. "They're throwing every tactic in the book at you," she said during our first meeting. "And it's not about winning. It's about dragging you through mud, hoping you give up or settle." "I'm not settling," I said. She gave a tight smile. "Good, because it's going to get worse before it gets better." And it did. They subpoenaed Grandpa's medical records, looking for anything that could suggest cognitive decline. Every doctor's note, every prescription, every scribbled post-it on the fridge, they wanted it all. They claimed he was easily manipulated in his final months, and that I'd inserted myself to cut them out. They accused me of exploiting a vulnerable elderly man for financial gain. They were trying to rewrite history. And the worst part? Ava went silent. I texted her once, "Are you helping them with this?" She read it. No reply. For the first time since the will reading, I felt truly alone. The fall came slowly, like watching a leak in the roof turn into a flood. My accounts were frozen under the injunction, which meant my freelance clients started pulling back. I missed deadlines, lost commissions, and ended up having to shut down my Etsy shop just to stop the flood of refund requests. People thought I'd gone off the grid. I almost did. The house started to feel like a trap. Every creaking floorboard reminded me of Grandpa. Every photo on the wall made my chest ache. I couldn't even walk past the garage without picturing him in his coveralls, leaning over the hood of some ancient Buick, grumbling about fuel lines. And through it all, the rumors kept spreading. Someone posted in the neighborhood Facebook group that I was hoarding an estate that was meant for the whole family. Someone else said I'd forced Grandpa to rewrite the will behind everyone's back. I started getting weird looks at the grocery store, at the gas station, even at the vet when I brought in the stray cat Grandpa used to feed behind the shed. Everyone had an opinion, and most of them weren't good. I hit bottom on a Tuesday. I remember the day because it rained, rare in Arizona, and the leak in the ceiling finally gave out. Water splashed onto my sketch pad, warping the pages. I didn't even try to save it. I just sat there, staring at the mess, feeling utterly hollow. That night, I curled up on Grandpa's old recliner, pulled a quilt over my shoulders, and broke down. Not just tears, full body, chest-heaving sobs. For everything. For the betrayal. For the silence. For the years of being unwanted. For the man who gave me everything and wasn't here to tell me what to do. I cried until I fell asleep. And the next morning, I got up and made coffee. Not just for caffeine. For him. It was what he would have done. That morning, I opened the garage. It smelled like oil, wood dust, and old leather. His tools were still on the pegboard. His red shop towel was still hanging off the side of the workbench. I walked inside like I was stepping into church. And that's when I saw it. The old file cabinet near the back wall. I remembered it vaguely. Grandpa used to say, "That's where I keep my treasures." I always thought he meant old receipts and expired fishing licenses. But something nudged me to look. I opened the bottom drawer. Inside was a thick accordion folder labeled Ideas. I sat cross-legged on the concrete floor and started flipping through it. Blueprints, sketches, designs for modified car parts, innovations, weird hybrids, handwritten notes with titles like Cooling Pipe Redesign for 327 V8 and Hutchins Custom Manifold Concept. All of it, drawings, measurements, parts lists. And then I found a letter, handwritten, folded, yellowed with time. It was addressed to me. Owen, if you're reading this, it means things didn't go the way I planned. First thing, I'm sorry. Second thing, don't let them take this from you. Not just the money. Not just the house. You're more than the kid they kicked out. You're more than the tears and the doubt and the nights you wondered if you mattered. You matter. Build something. Anything. Doesn't have to be a business. Doesn't have to make you rich. Just make it yours. They took enough from both of us. Now take something back. I read it 3 times. And when I was done, I stood up, grabbed the file, and got to work. It started small. I reopened my Etsy shop, but instead of portraits, I posted mock-ups of custom garage signs. Hutchins Customs. Built, not bought. Tools, grit, and grease. Cheesy maybe, but it sold. People liked the retro designs. They liked the story. I shared a bit about Grandpa. Just enough to be real. Sales started trickling in. Then I dusted off my old tablet and started sketching again. Not for clients. Not for likes. For me. I illustrated a comic strip based on my life with Grandpa. Nothing fancy, just short stories. Like the time he taught me how to change a tire with nothing but a wrench and a milk crate. Or the time he let me eat ice cream at 9 a.m. because some rules are dumb, kid. I posted them to a small art page I hadn't used in years. And somehow they took off. One got shared. Then another. Then someone messaged me asking if they could turn the comic into a short film. Another offered to license the designs for a found family merch line. I didn't jump on anything yet, but the messages kept coming. I felt something shift. Not big, not loud, but real. I was building again. Not for revenge. Not for validation. For him. For me. Then, just as I started feeling whole again, Ava came back. This time, she wasn't quiet. She was crying. And what she told me, what she handed me, it blew the entire case wide open. I heard the knocking before I saw the headlights. It was almost midnight, and I'd just finished uploading a new sketch to my comic series. A simple black and white panel of Grandpa and me sitting on the tailgate of his truck, eating sandwiches, no words needed. It had barely been live for 5 minutes before someone started banging on my front door like the place was on fire. I froze. After everything, the threats, the lawsuit, the slashed tires, my mind immediately went to the worst-case scenario. I grabbed the crowbar from beside the fridge, inched toward the door, and peeked through the side window. It was Ava. She looked like she'd run the entire way from Phoenix. Her makeup was smudged, her hair pinned back hastily, and her eyes were red, puffy, and wet. She was breathing hard and holding a crumpled envelope like it was made of glass. I opened the door, still gripping the crowbar. She blinked at it. You expecting zombies, or just mom and dad? Hard to tell the difference lately, I muttered. She didn't smile. Instead, she stepped inside, shaking. I can't do this anymore. I shouldn't have waited this long, Owen. I'm sorry. I closed the door behind her. Okay, what happened? She didn't answer right away. She just handed me the envelope. It was one of those cheap manila types from an office supply store, with a single word scribbled on the front in Sharpie. Copy. Inside were 3 pages. The first was a printed email from an account labeled private.familyfirm@gmail.com. The subject line read, Project Inheritance Contingency Plan. The second was an invoice from a private investigator named Troy M. something. Most of it was redacted with a black marker, but I could make out the words surveillance, target, Owen Hutchins, and duration, 90 days. The third page was a typed letter from my father, signed and dated, addressed to a man named Julian Harland. It was marked confidential. Julian, I appreciate your discretion in this matter. My son has proven to be more problematic than expected. He's leveraging the will for public sympathy, and I suspect he may attempt to monetize it. If we can establish a pattern of erratic behavior or possible manipulation of Raymond's mental state, we can win this. Do whatever it takes. Discreetly, I sat down slowly. My chest was pounding. My ears rang like I'd been hit with a flashbang. They hired someone to follow me. I asked, voice barely above a whisper. Ava nodded, eyes brimming. It started right after the will was read. Dad said they needed insurance in case the legal route didn't work. The PI's been watching you for weeks, taking photos, digging into your accounts. He even tried contacting some of your old clients. I stared at the letter again, while rising in my throat. And Mom, she knew. She said it was necessary. Said you were using your sob story to play the victim. I didn't know about the PI until a few days ago. But this, she pointed at the email. This is when I realized they've gone too far. She sat down on Grandpa's recliner and started crying again, quietly this time, like she was ashamed of the sound. I should have stopped them sooner, she said. I didn't know how. I thought if I stayed out of it, I wasn't part of it. But that's not true. I let them lie about you. I let them watch you. Something in me snapped. Not in a loud, explosive way. In a cold, clear way, like the exact second ice turns to glass. They crossed the line, I said. Ava looked up. What are you going to do? I didn't answer right away, because I didn't know yet. But I knew who to call. The next morning, I met with Sheila, my attorney, at her office. I brought the documents. She brought the fire. They hired a PI to dig up dirt on you while you were being sued by them, she said, practically vibrating with rage. That's textbook harassment. Possibly even a violation of the injunction terms if they used any of this to influence the case. And they tried to use it to frame me, I added. She nodded, scanning the documents again. We can use this. I want to do more than use it. I want to end this. She sat back in her chair, studying me. I don't just want to win the case, I continued. I want to expose them. Everything. The manipulation. The surveillance. The lies. All of it. Sheila smiled. A small, approving curve of her lips. Well then, she said, let's set the stage. Step 1 was securing the evidence. We got a subpoena for the PI's business records, using the email and invoice as grounds. Turns out he wasn't very good at covering his tracks. Sheila uncovered billing logs, GPS tags, and a series of dated surveillance photos that included, I kid you not, one of me asleep in my own backyard hammock. Creepy didn't even begin to cover it. Step 2 was turning public perception. I didn't want a media circus, but I did want to control the narrative. So I posted a new entry on my art page. It was simple, a single comic strip. Grandpa and me again, this time seated at a table labeled Last Wishes. Behind us, faceless figures in suits loomed in the background, hands reaching for stacks of paper. The final panel showed Grandpa passing me a note that said, "Make it count." No names, no accusations, just the truth in pictures. The post exploded. Thousands of likes, shares, comments. Other people came forward, sharing stories of contested wills, greedy relatives, betrayals. I wasn't alone. And more importantly, I wasn't the villain in their eyes. Step 3 was preparing Ava. She agreed to testify. It wasn't easy. The night before her statement, she sat at my kitchen table drinking tea with trembling hands, reading her own typed words over and over like she was bracing for execution. They're going to disown me, she whispered. They disowned me, too, I said. And I survived. She looked at me like she was seeing me for the first time. I used to be jealous of you, she admitted. You left. You built a life. You had Grandpa. I looked down. Yeah, but you had them. At least, I thought you did. I didn't, she said, and there was no sadness in her voice, just clarity. They only loved the version of me that obeyed. That night, we watched a rerun of some cooking show Grandpa used to love and didn't talk about the trial. We didn't need to. Step 4 was the wild card. The garage. I'd been slowly cataloging Grandpa's design folder, scanning each blueprint, writing short blurbs about his concepts, his notes, his ideas. I turned it into a digital archive, the Hutchins collection. Then I reached out to a vintage car restoration company in Los Angeles. I explained who I was, shared a few sample designs, and asked if they'd be interested in reviewing his work for potential licensing. They responded in 2 hours. Yes, absolutely. Let's talk. By the end of the week, we had a preliminary agreement in writing, a design licensing deal that could turn his hand-drawn concepts into a retro accessory line. Decals, custom parts, limited edition builds. It wasn't a fortune yet, but it was proof that Grandpa's legacy had value beyond the will, that I wasn't squatting on an inheritance, I was stewarding it. And that made the timing of the final hearing even more perfect. Because now, I had a narrative, a witness, proof of harassment, and a brand new contract in my hands. All I had to do was wait. The day of the hearing, I wore one of Grandpa's flannel shirts under my blazer, tucked, clean, professional, but unmistakably me. I walked into the courtroom with Ava by my side. Sheila had her game face on, and I had a folder labeled Legacy. My parents were already there. They looked different, not smug, not confident, nervous. My father's hands were clasped too tightly. My mother's lipstick was too red, too fresh, like she'd reapplied it 3 times already. And when they saw Ava walk in with me, my mother's face cracked. The judge entered. The proceedings began. I won't bore you with legal jargon, but here's what mattered. Ava testified about the PI, the threats, and the internal conversations about the will. Sheila presented the subpoenaed documents. And I, calmly, clearly, shared what Grandpa had told me in his final months. I didn't manipulate him, I said. I took care of him. I made him laugh. I held his hand when he was in pain. I wasn't trying to win anything. I just didn't want him to die alone. And then I handed the judge a copy of the licensing agreement. His ideas are going to live on, I said. I'm making sure of that. The courtroom was silent. And then, right before the judge called a recess, Sheila leaned in and whispered, "They're cracking. You can see it." I nodded, breathing steady, because I wasn't scared anymore. I wasn't the art kid with nowhere to go. I was the heir to a legacy, and they were about to lose everything they tried to steal. The final day of the hearing didn't feel like a war. It felt like a quiet demolition, controlled, methodical. Each piece of their case, every shaky accusation, every manufactured insult, every whispered smear campaign, was dismantled one by one until all that remained was dust. Sheila called it surgical. I just called it justice. The judge returned from recess looking particularly grim. He shuffled through our files again, our evidence, the licensing contract, Ava's written testimony, and took a deep breath before speaking. In matters of contested wills, the burden of proof lies with those who allege undue influence or fraud. The evidence presented by the petitioners, he glanced over at my parents, fails to meet that standard. My mother stiffened. My father didn't move at all. The judge continued. Furthermore, the court finds compelling evidence that the decedent, Mr. Raymond Hutchins, made his final wishes clear, consistent, and free from coercion. The will dated March 14th stands as valid. The injunction is lifted. Full estate control reverts immediately to Owen Hutchins. The sound that left my mother's mouth was halfway between a gasp and a choke. And just like that, it was over. Well, legally. But the real fallout? That came after. They didn't storm out. That would have required a shred of dignity. Instead, my father stood with the stiffness of a man watching a lifetime of power slip through his fingers. He turned to Ava, his own daughter, and said through clenched teeth, "I hope you're proud of yourself." Ava didn't flinch. "I am," she said. He blinked, like he hadn't prepared for that. Then my mother, who'd spent most of the hearing scribbling passive-aggressive notes to their lawyer, tried one last performance. She stood, smoothed her dress, and said in a loud, pointed voice, "You manipulated him. He was old. He wasn't in his right mind. That money was never meant for. I don't care what you think anymore," I said, standing up, my voice calm but clear. "You already told me I wasn't part of this family. 10 years ago, remember?" She stared at me like I'd slapped her. And then Ava spoke. "No, Mom," she said. "What you really meant was that Owen didn't serve your image anymore. He didn't fit your Christmas card. And now that he's not struggling, now that he actually has something, you want to take it back." My mother turned pale. "And just so you know," Ava added, her voice icy, "I'm done playing the daughter you want." The silence was nuclear. Then my parents left, wordless, stiff-backed and tight-jawed, like royalty who'd just been politely exiled. They didn't look back. 3 days later, I received a message from my dad. Not a call, not even a voicemail, just a single text. "You'll regret this." I stared at it for a long time, and then I blocked the number. Life didn't change overnight. There was no victory parade, no fanfare, just peace. The house felt different now, like it had been scrubbed clean of shadows. I spent the next week clearing out the garage and turning Grandpa's old workspace into something new, something mine. I ordered new lighting, updated the ventilation, even built a small digital station with my tablet, scanner, and a vintage radio. I kept one corner untouched. The stool, the workbench, the pegboard of tools he arranged by size like soldiers on parade. That was his space, and it stayed sacred. The licensing deal went through within the month. We did a small soft launch, a limited set of blueprints, a few merch items, a heritage series of custom badges for muscle cars. The response was bigger than I expected. Word spread through online car communities. Restoration shops started calling. Collectors wanted prints. The best part? I didn't do it alone. Ava helped with the branding. Turns out, her finance background had a creative streak buried deep beneath the spreadsheets. She designed a sleek logo, an old wrench wrapped in a comic-style ribbon, with the words Hutchins built in Grandpa's handwriting. We started working together more often, awkward at first, then easy, like siblings relearning a language they forgot they shared. She moved back to Phoenix and cut off contact with our parents. I didn't ask what they said. I didn't need to know, because we were building something better. The final piece of the revenge wasn't public. It wasn't loud. It came in the form of a single certified envelope I had Sheila send to their lawyer. Inside was a cease and desist letter, not just regarding the PI harassment, but a formal warning that if either of them attempted to use Grandpa's name, likeness, or work in any financial capacity, we'd sue them into oblivion. Attached to the letter was a list of every brand that had now legally licensed Grandpa's intellectual property. I didn't want their money. I just wanted them to know, you lost. Permanently. According to Ava, my father threw a chair across his office when he saw the letter. My mother posted a cryptic, "You can love someone and still be deeply disappointed" status on Facebook, which got exactly one like, from someone named Denise who sells essential oils. Months passed. The house stayed quiet. I kept sketching. The comics evolved, not just about Grandpa now, but about healing, family, rebuilding. I told stories about the garage, the garden, the long Arizona sunsets he and I used to sit through without speaking. And one day, I got an email from a publisher. They wanted to turn the comic into a graphic novel. They said it had heart, that it mattered. And as I sat on the back porch, coffee in hand, flipping through the original sketchbook, the one that got soaked in the rain, now dried and wrinkled, I realized something. They were right. It did matter. All of it. Every broken moment. Every betrayal. Every quiet night spent wondering if I was worth loving. Because in the end, I found something stronger than revenge. I found purpose. Last week, I visited Grandpa's grave. I hadn't been back since the funeral. Not because I was avoiding it, but because I didn't know what to say. Now I did. I sat on the grass beside the stone. A simple one, with just his name, his birth date, and the words he built things carved into it. And I told him everything. About the trial, the comics, the licensing deal, Ava, the novel. And when I was done, I placed a folded copy of the graphic novel's cover beside his headstone. A sketch of him, toolbox in hand, smiling with his crooked grin, and said, "They couldn't tear it down, Grandpa. I built something, just like you told me to." A warm breeze passed through the trees, rustling the grass like applause. I sat there for a while, and when I finally stood up, I felt taller than I had in years. Stronger, free, And as I walked back to the truck, I realized something else. They didn't lose the inheritance. They lost me. And I'm the most valuable thing they never appreciated. That's the legacy they'll have to live with. And that